Hello, I'm Larry Walters, the host From Sickness to Health. Welcome back to our second week. Today is another free principle. We guarantee it won't cost you any money to secure this principle of health. While it is free, its value to your health is unprecedented. Now, today, we're going to find ways to have more refreshing rest. Did you know the body needs daily rest and weekly rest? Most people know about the rest we need each night, but few know how physiologically we also need a weekly rest. Now, do you remember last week what we discussed on what causes sickness and disease? For those who missed our last presentation, here is the definition. Sickness and disease are an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. Now, we established last week that sickness and disease is not necessarily a bad thing in the context of laws or principles of health we're learning each week. Rather than being a bad thing, we established that it could be seen as a good thing when we view it as a warning when we are not following the principles of the new life. So in today's show, we're going to learn about the benefits of having refreshing rest and what happens when we don't have it. Let's launch into it with some facts on sleep. Number one, going to bed earlier is linked with better mental health. Point number two, sleep deprivation leads to higher blood pressure. Point number three, sleep deprivation is directly tied to an increase in cholesterol. Now, sleep duration affects even your heart health and overall cardiovascular disease symptoms. Now, sleep duration is directly linked with increased body mass index, or BMI. Now, let's take a look at our first video for this evening.
Lily, I'm going to have you wash the celery.
Wife, nanny,
Oh, I tricked you.
mother of three, fitness instructor. Seems like Shelley Halchuk can do it all, except for one thing.
The one thing I can't do is sleep.
Experts say Halchuk is one of the millions of Americans who don't get enough sleep.
I like to get 8, but I actually only get about 4 or 5.
The problem is so pervasive, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention considers insufficient sleep a public health epidemic, one that can have surprising consequences on your health.
Just because they can get by with 4 or 5 hours sleep, it may not be best for them. And it is pretty clear that not getting enough sleep on a nightly basis can lead to health problems.
Health problems such as hypertension, heart attack, stroke, diminished blood sugar control, possibly leading to diabetes, weight gain, anxiety, and depression. So how much sleep do we need? The National Sleep Foundation says children need between 9 and 10 hours of sleep each night, adults 7 to 8. How much sleep are we getting?
Maybe 6 hours? 5 hours.
5 hours. You think that's enough? No.
It's not, but in a 2009 CDC survey, about 35% of adults reported getting less than 7 hours of sleep a night, with nearly 40% reporting at least one incident of nodding off during the day, and even more disturbing, about 5% reported nodding off at least once while driving. A frightening number, since the U.S. Department of Transportation estimates more than 1,500 Americans are killed each year because of drowsy driving. So how can we get more sleep? By changing some habits, says Dr. Douglas Kirsch of the Brigham and Women's Faulkner Hospital Sleep Disorder Service in Boston. First, watch the caffeine intake, none after 1 or 2 p.m. Second, take time before bed to wind down. And third, stop the screen time well before bedtime.
When you get light from whether it's a TV screen or a mobile phone screen, it sort of sends a message to say, hey, it's not time for sleeping.
And finally, Dr. Kirsch says, start looking at sleep for what it is, as important to our good health as exercise and proper nutrition.
We should be spending 1/3 of our life sleeping, and when we deprive ourselves of that, we're really limiting our opportunities for good health.
And don't forget, besides enhanced productivity and better health, there's one more very important benefit to getting enough sleep. When we're well rested, as Shelley Halchuk knows, we tend to be nicer to each other.
I try, if I can get a nap in, like get a little, like a power nap, half hour, 45 minutes. If I can get that nap in, we're all good. But if I don't, the whole family pays.
In Boston, Massachusetts, Jim Morelli for CNN.
In the book Healthy Self, it talks about sleep rhythms. It deems refreshing rest as being in harmony with your body's circadian rhythm. Now let's look at our first question for this evening. Number 1, refreshing rest is going to be in harmony with your circadian rhythm, the sleep-wake cycle determined by day and night. Now, let's learn a little more about the circadian rhythm from the next video.
And you know that you have an internal clock. You get tired around the same time every day. You wake up around the same time. You have a basic idea of how much time is passing without having to check. Your biological clock is this precision timepiece in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It's made up of 20,000 neurons that control all the other timing mechanisms of your body, your sleep cycle, your metabolism, hormone production, even cell division. There are 1,440 minutes in a day, and the SCN counts them with only a 1 to 2% margin of error and keeps it running smoothly. It's called the circadian rhythm. So these 20,000 neurons are working together. They have to be able to stay in sync, right? And that takes constant work from a neurotransmitter chemical called GABA. The SCN also takes clues from outside stimuli, particularly sunlight, because we're diurnal animals. As the sun starts rising later or the days get longer, your clock slowly adjusts to make sure that you're set up to be active at the right parts of the day. Now, the downside is that the internal clock is delicate. It doesn't respond well to big changes in your routine or in nature. A sudden upset to your circadian rhythm can cause your hormone regulation to be out of sync, as well as your wake-sleep patterns and your times of peak productivity. That's why we're so affected by things like daylight savings time and jet lag. But subtler things can throw you off. And a long-term problem with your internal clock can cause serious health issues. For instance, a study conducted by Northwestern University showed that if your school or office doesn't get enough daylight, you will wind up getting about 45 minutes less sleep a night than people who work in a well-lit building, and the sleep is lower quality overall. And another study from Harvard showed that working just one night shift can impair your glucose tolerance, and in the long term, that can lead to obesity and even type 2 diabetes.
While resting, the body undergoes restoration and repair. That's our second question for the evening. While resting, the body undergoes restoration and repair. Now, science shows that our bodies go through a process of restoration and repair to our tissues and muscles that occur through natural use from movement and exercise. Now, while sleeping, our body's immune system gets recharged. So when we don't get the necessary sleep, our immune systems are weakened. Now, there was a study that explored sleep habits and susceptibility to the common cold. There were 153 men and women aged 21 to 55 years. They concluded that poor sleep efficiency and shorter sleep duration in the weeks preceding exposed to a rhinovirus, they were associated with lower resistance to illness. In other words, when sleep is not deep and restful, the immune system is compromised and too weak to fight off subsequent exposure to cold and flu viruses. Now, sleep deprivation, both short-term and long-term, can affect your immune system and therefore your resistance to disease. Even 3 hours of lost sleep on a single night can reduce the effectiveness of your immune system by 50%. Point number 3. Since sleeping reinforces our immune systems, we need to rest and fight sickness and disease. That's an interesting fact. Melatonin is the hormone which regulates sleep, but most people would never guess that melatonin also regulates your appetite. Now, the next video, it talks about the appetite hormones as well as a few other interesting things that happen when we don't get refreshing rest. Let's watch.
If you're looking for a way to prevent a winter cold, try getting 8 hours of sleep. Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University studied 153 men and women. All filled out surveys detailing their sleep history. Then they were injected with the common cold. For 5 days, they reported any cold symptoms they had. They found participants who got less than 7 hours of sleep were 3 times more likely to develop respiratory illness compared to those who slept 8 hours or more. Researchers also found participants who had trouble sleeping while in bed, even if it was for 8 hours, had an increased risk for a cold. Experts say a lack of sleep interferes with the body's immune response, therefore it may make it easier for infection to flourish.
Let's take another look at NBC Nightly News clip, which shows yet another chronic lifestyle disease up to 75% preventable by simply obeying the principle of refreshing rest during the times that are in harmony with our natural body rhythm.
But here's the deal. A lack of sleep has the opposite effect on the body. A lot of bad things can happen. So look at your brain here. Usually there's a nice little balance between ghrelin and leptin. These are two hunger hormones. One makes you feel more hungry, ghrelin. Leptin makes you less hungry. But if you're not getting enough sleep, these hormones can get out of whack. Too much ghrelin, too much eating. Well, why is that a big deal? Lack of sleep, too much eating also affects your cortisol levels. So your body produces more and more cortisol. That affects every single organ system in your body. We've talked about this on the show before. Cortisol and everything else can cause increase in headaches as you feel more stressed, frantic. There's just too much. You're overwhelmed when you're sleep deprived. You're tired, but all these cortisol, this increase in cortisol makes you feel more tired than you actually are. And then last but not least, your body is packing on the pounds, visceral fat, belly fat increases with lack of sleep. And all these things together, this increase in cortisol, lack of sleep, can honestly increase your risk of having a fatal heart attack if this is a constant thing over time.
Let's take a look at some additional research on this issue. Not getting good night's sleep and having it interrupted throughout the night increases the growth and the speed at which cancer cells spread. I'm going to read that again. Not getting good night's sleep and having it interrupted throughout the night increases the growth and the speed at which cancer cells spread, and has been a strong predictor of early death in cancer patients, including cancer of the colon. Therefore, proper sleep is crucial to both preventing cancer and fighting it. Sleep problems alter the balance of cortisol and melatonin, two hormones with a direct connection to cancer cells. Now, cortisol, which helps to keep the immune system in balance by releasing cells that help the body in its fight with cancer, usually peaks after sunrise and decreases throughout the day. Now, for people who work at night, their bodies try to compensate by having cortisol levels peak in the afternoon. But studies in women with breast cancer show that these women generally die sooner from the disease. The studies also show that women who work the night shift have higher rates of breast cancer. Because the body isn't following the proper cortisol rhythm, the T cell count is low, negatively affecting the immune system. This is the case with cortisol levels peaking at the wrong time of the day, as in the study of the night shift workers, or having a flat, unchanging cortisol level throughout the day, which has been a strong predictor of early lung cancer death. Now, studies also show that this tracking of cortisol levels can greatly aid in predicting early mortality. Just a few more facts about breast. There was a 2010 study that showed that regulation of the circadian rhythm affected pituitary and adrenal interaction, often overlooked in cancer research. Now, melatonin, which the brain produces while you are asleep, has antioxidants which may help prevent damage to cells in the first place, reducing the risk of cancer. Now, there are just a few what's called psychosocial factors. The effect that interaction with others bears on the mind and the mood. It may affect the course of cancer and its progression by disruption of neuroendocrine and immune circadian rhythms. Now, supportive relationships, they're healthy, whereas stressful relationships can affect sleep ability and cycles, affecting mood and depression, having further negative impact on the immune, the endocrine, and the metabolic systems, altering hormone levels and resulting in aggressive tumor progression and earlier death. But what about diabetes? Let's take a look at our next video that gives more insight.
Millions of Americans are doing little things that sabotage their sleep, and they just don't know it.
Getting some good shut-eye could be as simple as changing a few little habits. Health specialist Denise Dedore shows us where to start. I'm all ears, Denise.
All right, we all need some sleep, don't we? Health experts believe we are a nation of insomniacs. Numerous studies show driving on little sleep is as dangerous as driving drunk. Doctors say many people's sleep problems may be because of a few bad habits that can be fixed. For most of us, sleeping is simple, but if it's tough for you, you're not alone out there. Studies show 75% of us have sleep problems more than once a week. 47-year-old Carrie Pauley knows all about that.
When you can define your week as I had a good week because you slept through one night out of 7, that was a little disturbing.
Morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good. Dr. Bruce Thomas says adults need 7 to 9 hours of rest each night. Routinely miss that mark, and you could boost chances for obesity, substance abuse, and more.
You have an increased risk for type 2 diabetes. You have an increased risk of depression.
The solution, pretty basic. First, cut out the booze before bed. While it's a sedative, alcohol prevents deep sleep, encouraging light sleep. Secondly, watch the clock. If you're not snoozing 15 minutes after hitting the sack, get back up. Stressing over sleep can prevent it.
It's like your head's packed with cotton and everything is muted.
And if you're like Carrie and want to try sleep aids, use them only as a last resort.
The longer you take them, the more dependence you develop on them, the more side effects you can have and interactions with other drugs.
Carrie boosted his vitamins and balanced his hormones, which are other natural options.
The energy level was up, and I think the first person to pick up on a more bright disposition was my wife.
More sleep, happy wife, happy life. A pretty good combo. And if you're a woman who tends to use the snooze button more than your mate, there's a reason. A new English study says women need more sleep than men, about 20 more minutes each day. But in reality, we don't get that sleep.
Right, we all need it.
I know.
Denise, thank you.
Okay, point number 5. Lack of sleep can cause a host of health problems, including one of the major lifestyle diseases affecting 1 in 3 Americans. Have you guessed what that is? Type 2 diabetes. Did you hear that the part about hitting the snooze button? How if you're not up and you should get up? Turns out that constantly hitting the snooze button can cause stress on the body and work against you. Take a look at the next video.
Well, this might wake you up a little bit this morning. A scary fact. A report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates 15 to 33% of fatal crashes involve tired drivers. Being sleep deprived slows down our reaction time. And one of the biggest myths about sleep is that everyone needs a solid 8 hours to function. I know, I believe that. I've said that about myself. But we wonder what some of the other facts and myths are behind sleep. So let's try to break this down with our fitness and nutrition expert, Mark McDonald. So, okay, let's do this one first. Okay. You go out for dinner, have a nice dessert. Do I want coffee with my dessert? People say it stimulates digestion.
So it's true, it does stimulate digestion, but that works against your sleep because coffee, any stimulant, is going to increase your hormone, your adrenaline, which is your energy hormone, and that actually affects your sleep cycle.
Okay, and just break down some of the effects of sleep. Obviously, we see driving. You know, what are some of the other effects if you don't get enough sleep?
Well, if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to store fat. You're going to over-release the hormone cortisol. That's going to affect your energy. So look at sleep as like your body's battery charger. And just like your cell phone, you plug it into the outlet and it recharges your battery. Your sleep does the same thing. So when you don't get enough sleep, your body's not working and it directly affects negatively your metabolism.
Okay, so let's get back to our myths and facts. Is it true that the hours of sleep before midnight are more important than the hours after midnight? For all of you people who like to keep late hours and go to the club.
Completely false.
Really?
So, yeah,
okay.
So as long as your sleep is consistent, you're in a quiet environment, in a dark environment, you can sleep anytime. So you don't have to go to bed before midnight.
So you're telling me I can't say to my boss, no, I can't get up at 3 a.m. and go to work. I can't say that. Is that what you're saying?
No, as long as you're in a dark environment, because that affects your sleep rhythm.
He'll say to me, we'll just go to sleep at 7 p.m.
That's true.
This isn't, you shouldn't have have said that. Okay. Let's see. Also, what about metabolism? This is something, and you hear so many people talk about this. Everyone's always trying to, watch what they eat, keep off the weight, and when they do, they wonder how sleep is affecting their metabolism.
So the biggest thing is we think we are what we eat, or actually we are what we metabolize. So sleep, when you get a lack of sleep, you increase your stress hormone cortisol, and that makes you store body fat. So the biggest thing is this: everyone thinks they love the snooze button. But when you hit the snooze button, and let's say you keep in that light sleep for the next 30 minutes, that makes you store more body fat. So by simply not hitting the snooze button, getting that 30 quality minutes of sleep, that will help you lose weight because it directly affects your metabolism.
And does it actually make you call it useless sleep?
Yes. It's all light sleep.
Then why do we want to do it? Because I did it this morning. I got 7 extra minutes of sleep.
Yeah, because what happens is we want to wake up, then we take on our day, and then we calm down. So that wake-up time is like light sleep. It doesn't rejuvenate your body. So deep sleep rejuvenates your body. REM sleep rejuvenates your mind, and we do 90-minute cycles. So that light sleep, it might feel good, but it actually works against you. You need that quality sleep. So just wake up, and right when that alarm goes off, wake up and don't hit that snooze button. Mark,
all helpful stuff. We really appreciate it. Mark McDonald.
Thanks,
I think I'll be
Brianna.
implementing that in the next day even.
Get your metabolism rocking.
I know. I can get up at 3 a.m. Don't tell me that.
Okay, point number 6. There are 2 types of rest that the body was made to experience. We have our nightly and we have our weekly. Now, your nightly rest prepares us for the next day, while the weekly rest prepares us for the week ahead. Now, we have seen the importance of resting according to the day-night cycle, which is the circadian rhythm. But what about the weekly? A lot of people have heard of the circadian rhythm, but few know about the circadian rhythm. This is the weekly rhythm. Here we see that our bodies undergo a physiological change every 7 days. Point number 7. The daily rhythm is circadian and the weekly is circadian. Wasn't that interesting? Now, point number 8. The most ideal time to get refreshing rest is between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. Point number 9. True or false? The Natural Sleep Foundation suggests that adults should get 10 to 11 hours of sleep. That's a false statement. The recommended amount of sleep that for the average adult should range between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Point number 10. The study of 7-day cycles in the building blocks of plants and animal life is called chronobiology. It turns out that sleep or the lack thereof affects even your memory. Let's hear the science from the CBS This Morning video clip.
Good morning. In today's Health Watch, sleep and your memory. It turns out the amount and quality of sleep you get at night may affect your memory later in life. A new study tested sleep patterns of people between the ages of 45 and 80 who did not have any memory problems. Those who slept less than 6.5 hours or had tiny awakenings throughout the night were more likely to develop plaque in their brains. The plaque is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease and usually shows up years before memory loss begins. Although it's too soon to be sure, researchers think lack of sleep could be a risk factor for Alzheimer's, and improving sleep could prevent or slow the illness. Other studies have found sleep is important for memory throughout our lives, especially in childhood. Sleep-deprived kids have shorter attention spans and don't learn as efficiently. And sleep plays a role in turning short-term memories into long-term ones, and that's essential for learning new information. Ultimately, the research is just more evidence of how important sleep is to our physical and mental health, and another reminder to try to get enough shut-eye every night. I'm Dr. Holly Phillips.
Point number 11. Because of the circadian rhythm and the spike of the immune system, colds usually don't last for more than 1 week. That's a true statement. A quote from John Steinbeck says, "It is common to experience that a problem difficult at night is resolved in the morning after the committee of sleep has worked on it." Here is one final video to further emphasize rest and diet as well as a closing thought.
To that and figure out which foods also bother them, uncooked foods.
So I don't deal with allergies every day. I consider myself fortunate, but I think this whole allergy season, it's beyond just the pollens. We've been blaming pollens, and there's no question that that happens. That's a real fact. But I think there's something more going on medically with us, and you brought the sugar aspect of it. I think a lot of times our diet whether it's gluten, soy, or sugar. What it does, it really boosts up the insulin, and it sucks all this like cortisol that's supposed to get rid of the histamine, and that's when you get this kind of symptoms. And so I would urge people to watch what they eat. Stress, nobody knows exactly what stress does, but we know lack of sleep and stress increases your cortisol level. And cortisol is supposed to clean up all that histamine, and now you're boosting it, and it's being used somewhere else, and that's why you get all these symptoms. Sleep 7 to 8 hours of sleep. A lot of doctors won't tell you. What I also found, like a little trick after doing like hours of research about this, there is a favorite tea called nettle tea, N-E-T-T-L-E. Nettle tea and friends. It actually works like an antihistamine, but it's a delicious, you know, tasteful tea that you can have, especially at nighttime, and in the morning, some of those symptoms gone. And I posted all of this on Facebook, and you'll see it.
This is terrific. One more thing to add is when you go out in the morning and you come in covered with pollen, take a shower.
Next week, we'll be discussing the benefits of sunshine. So make sure you stay tuned to learn more about these amazing principles of the longest living Americans. And always remember, your health is your choice. See you next week.